Have you ever been called too nice? It's a phrase that might sound like a compliment at first, but what if I told you that being too nice could actually be causing you more harm than good? We all know that kindness is a great virtue, but there's a fine line between being kind and being someone who overextends themselves to the point of burnout. In today's video, we're going to dive deep into the hidden costs of always trying to please others. We'll uncover how constantly saying yes to every request can leave you drained, how people may take advantage of your goodwill, and why having poor boundaries can actually harm your relationships in the long run. We'll also talk about the fear of conflict, the pressure to sacrifice your own needs, and how, without self-care, your kindness can eventually turn into resentment. Stay tuned as we explore why being too nice might be the last thing you want to be, and why setting boundaries and learning to say no is the key to maintaining both your kindness and your happiness. Section 1. The hidden side of being too nice. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you're trying to be as kind and agreeable as possible, only to feel worn out and unappreciated later? Maybe you've heard the phrase, "you're too nice," from friends or co-workers. It's often said in a way that sounds positive, like you're being praised for your generosity and selflessness. But what if I told you that being too nice could actually be doing more harm than good? It might seem counterintuitive. After all, kindness is a virtue, right? It's something we're all taught to aspire to. But there's a difference between being kind and being overly nice to the point of self-neglect. It's easy to assume that being nice means making everyone happy, but in reality, this can lead to unintended consequences that affect your mental, emotional, and even physical health. When we talk about being too nice, we're often referring to a pattern where people go out of their way to avoid conflict, say yes to everything, and put others' needs before their own at the expense of their well-being. This desire to please everyone and never rock the boat can create a false sense of harmony. But underneath the surface, it can lead to stress, resentment, and burnout. So why does this happen? Well, there are many reasons someone might become too nice. It could stem from a deep desire to be liked, a fear of rejection, or even a fear of confrontation. For some, being nice is an ingrained habit, learned early on to fit in or gain approval. It's common for people to feel that by being overly accommodating or helpful, they can earn affection, trust, or respect from others. But over time, this can turn into a form of people-pleasing, where their own wants and needs are pushed aside. What's important to understand here is that being too nice doesn't just mean you're overly friendly or considerate. It means you're often sacrificing your own happiness, comfort, and even health in the process. You might feel pressure to be the go-to person for everyone in your circle, whether that's your family, friends, or co-workers. You might say yes to helping with a project you don't care about, or agree to attend social events you'd rather avoid, just to avoid disappointing someone else. This sense of obligation to always be accommodating comes at a cost. It can lead to feelings of frustration and resentment, especially when others don't reciprocate the same level of effort or appreciation. And what's worse is that when you're constantly focusing on others' needs, you can end up neglecting your own. Over time, this self-sacrifice can lead to a loss of identity. When you're always giving to others, you forget to give to yourself. You may find yourself wondering, why do I feel so drained? Why do I feel invisible? The irony here is that while you're trying to create harmony by being too nice, you're actually setting the stage for more tension in the long run. The people around you may come to expect your endless support without ever considering your own feelings or limitations. And this can create a subtle dynamic where your kindness is taken for granted, leaving you feeling overlooked and unappreciated. In short, being too nice isn't as harmless as it might seem. It can set you up for exhaustion, burnout, and even resentment. You may start to feel like you're living a life designed around everyone else's happiness instead of your own, and that's not sustainable. So let's take a closer look at the hidden costs of being overly nice and why it's important to recognize when kindness crosses into self-neglect. Section 2. The problem with always saying yes. When you're someone who's always striving to be nice, it often means you're the first person to say yes when others ask for help. It might feel good at first, especially when you're able to meet someone's needs or expectations. But constantly saying yes can have some serious consequences. The immediate response might be, "I'm helping." But in the long run, this habit can cause a lot of problems that aren't so obvious at first glance. One of the biggest issues with always saying yes is that it leads to neglecting your own priorities. If you're constantly putting others' needs ahead of your own, your personal goals and desires get pushed aside. Over time, this creates a situation where you're just reacting to other people's demands instead of proactively shaping your own life. And here's the kicker. You might not even realize it's happening because you're so used to saying yes and it feels like the right thing to do. At first, it might seem like you're just being kind, but the more often you say yes, the more likely you are to fall into a pattern where you don't even stop to think about what's best for you. You may commit to things that you don't really have time for, or that don't align with your values. And as time passes, you end up with a packed schedule that leaves you no time for yourself, no time to rest, and definitely no time to pursue things that are truly meaningful to you. Let's also talk about the emotional side of this. The more you say yes to others, the more you might start to feel like you're living for other people instead of yourself. This leads to feelings of frustration and resentment. Think about it. You're always the one making the effort to accommodate others, but when it comes to your needs, where's the reciprocity? Where's the understanding from the people you've been so generous to? Over time, this imbalance can cause a deep sense of emotional exhaustion. And don't forget, there's the added pressure of expectations. Once you start saying yes all the time, people begin to expect it from you. This creates a cycle where you feel almost obligated to help, even when you don't want to. It's like you've set an unspoken rule that you are always available, and that can feel like a heavy burden to carry. Instead of being someone who makes thoughtful decisions about when to help, you've turned into the go-to person for everything, which again might feel flattering in the moment, but it can quickly turn into a stress-inducing habit. Then, of course, there's the guilt factor. Once you get into the habit of saying yes, saying no starts to feel almost impossible. You feel guilty for even thinking about turning someone down. What if they get mad? What if they think you're selfish? The idea of letting someone down creates a mental barrier that makes it harder to protect your own time and energy. This constant guilt can erode your sense of self-worth, leaving you questioning your own needs as less important than those of others. So, while saying yes might come from a place of wanting to be helpful and kind, the reality is that it can have long-term consequences on your mental health, your happiness, and your personal well-being. When you start to say yes to everything, you might be saying no to yourself, your time, your needs, and your peace of mind. And in the end, that's what can really start to feel like the problem with always saying yes. Section 3. The cost of overcommitment. When you're constantly trying to be nice and please everyone, overcommitment becomes inevitable. You might find yourself agreeing to multiple tasks and responsibilities, even when you don't have the time or energy to fully dedicate yourself to them. At first, it might feel good to be seen as someone who is always there to help. But as the commitments start piling up, you begin to notice the cracks. Overcommitting can lead to a constant sense of pressure, as you're juggling multiple things at once, each one demanding your attention and energy. You might stay up late finishing projects, cancel plans with friends or family, and sacrifice your personal time. In the beginning, it might feel like you're doing good by others, but what often happens is that your own needs are ignored. The real cost of overcommitment is the toll it takes on your mental health. When you say yes to too many things, your stress levels begin to rise. You may find yourself feeling overwhelmed, anxious, or even resentful. The more commitments you take on, the less time you have for relaxation, self-care, or simply doing what makes you happy. The pressure to meet everyone's expectations leads to burnout, and that's when the quality of your efforts starts to decline. Think about it. When you're spread so thin, your attention isn't fully on any one task. Your work might suffer, Your relationships might strain, and your overall well-being might deteriorate. It's not sustainable in the long run. The exhaustion from always being on the go leaves you unable to recharge, and before you know it, you're running on empty. Not only does overcommitting cause personal stress, but it can also harm your relationships with others. When you're constantly available, people start to expect it. They might begin taking your willingness to help for granted, never fully appreciating the sacrifices you're making. When you finally do need to say no, they may not understand or might even be disappointed. Over time, you could feel taken for granted or unappreciated. What's even more challenging is that overcommitment often involves neglecting your own goals and desires. When you're too busy trying to meet everyone else's expectations, your own ambitions take a back seat. This cycle leads to a sense of stagnation. You're stuck in a loop of saying yes to others and saying no to yourself. At the heart of overcommitment is a lack of boundaries. It's hard to say no when you're afraid of disappointing people, and it's even harder when you've built a reputation for always saying yes. However, the long-term consequences of overcommitting far outweigh the temporary satisfaction of being the person everyone can count on. It's essential to recognize when you've reached your limit. In conclusion, overcommitment doesn't just drain your energy and time, it chips away at your happiness and personal growth. By learning to say no and prioritize your own needs, you'll not only improve your well-being, but also enhance the quality of the help and support you can offer to others. It's a win-win situation. Section 4. People may take advantage. When you're always putting others first and being too nice, there's a real risk that some people will start to take advantage of your kindness. It often starts small. Maybe a friend asks for help moving a few boxes, or someone at work asks you to cover their shift. In the beginning, it may seem harmless, but over time, it can escalate into an expectation rather than a favor. The issue is that some people might start to see you as a resource rather than a person. They know you'll say yes, so they start asking for more and more without offering anything in return. It's important to recognize when kindness crosses into self-sacrifice. If you're always the one dropping everything to help someone, even when it interferes with your own life, you're not just being helpful, you're being taken advantage of. This isn't about being unkind. It's about realizing that you don't have to do everything for everyone all the time. True friendships, healthy work relationships, and mutual respect all require balance. If you're always the one giving, it can create an unhealthy dynamic where others expect you to fulfill their needs without acknowledging yours. The problem becomes even more apparent when you're dealing with people who are aware of your nice nature and exploit it. This can happen in various settings, at work, in friendships, or even with family members. For instance, at work, you might find that you're consistently assigned extra tasks because your colleagues know you'll take them on without complaining. Over time, this could negatively affect your career because you're too busy helping others to focus on your own goals or responsibilities. What may have started as small acts of kindness could lead to a situation where you're overworked, undervalued, and left with little to show for your efforts. In personal relationships, this can lead to a pattern where you're constantly doing things for others, but when it's your turn to ask for help or support, they might not be as willing. It's the one-way street dynamic where your kindness isn't reciprocated and you end up feeling like you've been used. This can create feelings of resentment, as you're left wondering why you're always the one doing the heavy lifting, while others sit back and enjoy the benefits of your generosity. One of the hardest things to confront in these situations is the realization that being too nice can lead to feelings of exploitation. But in order to stop this cycle, you need to set boundaries. Start by recognizing when a request from someone is reasonable and when it's too much. Being able to say no doesn't mean you're being rude or unkind. It means you're respecting yourself and your own needs. By establishing clear boundaries, you protect yourself from being taken advantage of, while still maintaining healthy, respectful relationships with others. The key is to balance kindness with assertiveness. This doesn't mean you stop helping people altogether, but you do it in a way that doesn't compromise your own well-being. You learn to say no when it's necessary and set limits when people push your boundaries. This might feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to always saying yes, but over time, you'll see that the people who truly care about you will respect your boundaries. Those who don't, however, might show their true colors. And in those cases, it's okay to reevaluate the relationship. If you feel like you're constantly being taken advantage of, it's important to ask yourself why you're allowing it. Are you afraid of confrontation? Do you fear that saying no will make people think you're mean? Or do you feel guilty for wanting to put yourself first? These are natural concerns, but they don't justify sacrificing your own happiness and well-being for the sake of others. Remember, you're entitled to protect your time, your energy, and your peace of mind. In the long run, if you allow people to take advantage of your kindness, it can lead to frustration, bitterness, and burnout. The solution isn't to stop being nice, but to be selective with your kindness. Choose where to direct your energy and understand that you don't have to say yes to every request. By doing this, you'll find that your relationships will be more meaningful and you'll be in a better position to help others when they truly need it. Section 5. The dangers of weak boundaries. When you're always striving to be nice, one of the first things that tends to slip is your personal boundaries. Healthy boundaries are the invisible lines that define where you end and others begin. They are what allow you to prioritize your own needs, set limits, and maintain a sense of autonomy in your relationships. However, when you become too focused on pleasing others, you risk losing sight of these boundaries altogether. At first, it might seem harmless to accommodate every request or suggestion. You might feel like you're just being supportive, helpful, or cooperative. But over time, this tendency to constantly put others before yourself can lead to a blurred sense of where you stand in your relationships. You might agree to things you're not comfortable with, or make sacrifices that aren't in your best interest, all for the sake of keeping the peace or avoiding conflict. The problem is, when you neglect your own boundaries, you open the door for others to overstep without even realizing it. Take, for example, the situation where you're constantly asked to stay late at work. At first, it might feel like you're just doing your part and being a good team player. But if you don't communicate your limits, you risk being taken advantage of, as colleagues or supervisors may begin to expect you to always be the one to pick up extra tasks. This can lead to burnout, as your work-life balance deteriorates and your personal time gets eaten up by obligations you never intended to take on. Boundaries also apply in personal relationships. When you're too nice, you might allow people to take up more of your time and energy than you're comfortable with. Maybe a friend or family member constantly leans on you for support without considering your own needs or emotional capacity. You might feel guilty or selfish if you ever think about saying no, even though deep down you know you can't always be there for them without negatively affecting your own well-being. This pattern of people-pleasing can create a cycle of resentment and frustration. When you continuously say yes to others without considering how it affects you, you're essentially training those around you to expect that behavior. And the more this happens, the harder it becomes to establish boundaries. You might feel like you're stuck in a pattern of constantly accommodating others, fearing that if you start saying no, people might criticize you, distance themselves, or stop valuing your contributions altogether. The truth is, without healthy boundaries, you risk becoming a doormat in your own life. While it might seem like you're being kind or generous, it's important to ask yourself, am I doing this because I genuinely want to, or because I feel obligated to? Are my actions truly benefiting me and the other person, or am I simply avoiding the discomfort of saying no? The longer you ignore your boundaries, the harder it becomes to regain control over your time, energy, and emotions. To develop and maintain healthy boundaries, it's essential to start recognizing your own limits. Ask yourself what feels right for you, what drains you, and what you're unwilling to tolerate. Remember that setting boundaries is not about being rude or rejecting others. It's about protecting your own well-being and ensuring that your relationships are respectful and reciprocal. Saying no is a crucial part of this process, It's a way of asserting your needs without guilt or fear. In the end, having clear boundaries doesn't make you any less kind or compassionate. It simply means you're taking care of yourself first. By doing so, you'll be in a much stronger position to help others when it truly matters, without compromising your own happiness or mental health. Section 6. The fear of conflict. One of the biggest reasons people are often too nice is the deep fear of conflict. The thought of confronting someone or saying no can be incredibly uncomfortable for many. It's not just about avoiding an argument, it's the fear of creating tension, disappointing others, or damaging relationships. This fear is often rooted in a desire to maintain peace and harmony, but the truth is, avoiding conflict altogether can lead to much bigger issues down the line. People who are too nice often believe that any form of disagreement or tension will cause irreparable harm to their relationships. They're afraid that by speaking up or asserting their needs, they'll be seen as rude, selfish, or uncaring. The idea of upsetting someone, even if it's justified, can feel like a huge risk. So they take the easier route. They keep quiet, agree to things they don't want to do, or avoid saying no altogether. They become passive in their interactions, letting others take the lead. However, this fear of conflict doesn't actually solve anything. In fact, it can create bigger problems in the long run. When you're constantly avoiding difficult conversations, you're likely suppressing your true feelings and needs. Over time, this can build up into resentment. You might start feeling frustrated with people who take advantage of your kindness, but you haven't communicated your limits, so they don't know how to adjust. Instead of resolving issues, you're simply bottling them up, which can lead to emotional burnout. It's also important to understand that conflict is a natural part of any relationship. Disagreement doesn't necessarily mean the end of a relationship. It can actually make it stronger. Healthy conflict resolution allows both parties to understand each other better, express their needs, and find common ground. When you shy away from conflict, you're missing out on the opportunity to grow both as an individual and within your relationships. Part of overcoming this fear is recognizing that you don't have to choose between being kind and standing up for yourself. In fact, you can do both. Being assertive doesn't mean being rude or disrespectful. It simply means expressing your thoughts and feelings honestly and directly. It's about finding the courage to say, "This doesn't work for me," or "I need this time for myself." When you communicate your needs clearly, you allow the other person the chance to respond appropriately. More often than not, people will respect your boundaries once they know what they are. It's also worth mentioning that being too nice in the face of conflict can sometimes lead to people walking all over you. If you're constantly avoiding confrontation, people may start to expect that you'll always agree to whatever they want. This dynamic can turn unhealthy very quickly. People might take advantage of your unwillingness to challenge them, leading to situations where your kindness is exploited. Learning how to deal with conflict is a skill that takes time to develop, but it's one that is absolutely necessary for maintaining healthy relationships and protecting your own well-being. Instead of seeing conflict as something to be avoided at all costs, try to reframe it as an opportunity for growth. By addressing issues head-on, you're not only protecting your own emotional health, but you're also showing others how to treat you with respect. In the end, the fear of conflict might seem like a way to keep things peaceful, but it often leads to deeper issues down the road. Embracing conflict as a natural part of life, rather than a threat, can help you set healthier boundaries and cultivate more meaningful, balanced relationships. It's all about finding that middle ground between being kind and being true to yourself. Section 7. You can lose yourself in the process. When you're constantly trying to be the nice person, it's easy to forget about your own needs and desires. Over time, this can lead to a situation where you no longer know who you are or what you truly want. You start living to fulfill other people's expectations instead of your own goals. Every decision you make, every action you take, becomes about pleasing others, and this can create a deep sense of disconnect from your true self. At first, being nice may seem like a simple way to get along with others and maintain harmony. But the problem begins when you start defining your self-worth based on how others perceive you. If you're always trying to be the helpful, agreeable person, you may start to lose sight of what makes you you. This can lead to feelings of confusion and frustration, especially when you're faced with decisions that require you to prioritize your own interests. You might catch yourself constantly asking, what do they need, or what do they want from me, and forgetting to ask, what do I need, or what do I want? Over time, this imbalance creates a scenario where your life is no longer guided by your own values, but by the approval or acceptance of others. This can lead to a situation where you're constantly trying to please everyone around you, but you end up feeling unfulfilled because you've neglected your own aspirations. You might say yes to something that doesn't align with your values, just to avoid confrontation or keep someone else happy. At the same time, you might start to ignore your own passions and goals because they don't seem as important in the grand scheme of keeping others content. In a world where we're often told to put others first, it's easy to fall into the trap of believing that your own needs should always come last. But when you prioritize others at the expense of your own happiness and well-being, you begin to lose yourself in the process. You stop being the person you truly are and start becoming a version of yourself that exists to please everyone else. Over time, you may even forget what it feels like to make decisions for your own happiness, not just out of obligation or guilt. This can be especially harmful in close relationships. If you're always putting the needs of others above your own, it can create a one-sided dynamic where you're giving and giving without ever receiving the same in return. This can lead to feelings of resentment, frustration, and loneliness. The more you lose yourself in trying to meet the needs of others, the more isolated you may feel, even when you're surrounded by people. And it's not just about losing your sense of self. It can also impact your mental and emotional well-being. When you're constantly sacrificing your own desires to make others happy, it can create a sense of internal conflict. You may start feeling disconnected from your own emotions, unsure of what you truly want or need in any given situation. This emotional disconnect can make it harder to make decisions or even recognize when you're unhappy, because you've spent so long pushing your own feelings aside. What's worse, this tendency to lose yourself can become a vicious cycle. The more you lose touch with your own needs, the harder it becomes to recognize when you need to make a change. You might start feeling trapped in a life that doesn't reflect your true self, but it's hard to break free when you've been living for others for so long. If this sounds familiar, it's a sign that you may need to take a step back and reassess your approach. It's crucial to recognize that being kind to others doesn't mean losing yourself in the process. In fact, the best way to show up for others is by first taking care of yourself. By nurturing your own needs, passions, and desires, you can build a stronger, more authentic connection with those around you. And when you're true to yourself, your kindness will come from a place of strength, not depletion. Ultimately, finding balance is key. You can still be caring, generous, and thoughtful, but you also need to make space for your own personal growth and happiness. Remember, you're worthy of the same love and respect you give to others. So take the time to rediscover who you are, what you enjoy, and what your personal goals are. Reconnect with your values and your passions, and remember that you don't have to lose yourself in the process of being kind to others. Section 8. True kindness from a place of self-care. True kindness doesn't mean sacrificing yourself at every turn. It comes from a place of self-awareness and self-care. Often, when we're caught up in trying to be nice to others, we forget that we need to take care of ourselves first. Think of it like the oxygen mask in an airplane. You're instructed to put your mask on first before helping others. If you don't take care of your own needs, you can't truly be there for anyone else in a meaningful way. When you're constantly giving, whether it's your time, energy, or emotions, without taking time to recharge, you begin to run on empty. This isn't just about physical exhaustion, it's mental, emotional, and even spiritual burnout. Without self-care, you may start to feel disconnected from yourself, wondering who you really are outside of the roles you play for others. In this state, your kindness might become more of a reflex, a habit to make others feel comfortable, rather than a genuine expression of love or compassion. Self-care doesn't mean being selfish. It's not about ignoring others' needs or being cold-hearted. In fact, when you practice self-care, you're actually in a better position to show up for the people around you. You're more patient, more empathetic, and more authentic. When you're drained and overextended, your ability to be kind becomes more performative, more about fulfilling a role rather than truly engaging with others. But when you're taking care of yourself, your kindness comes from a place of strength and authenticity. One key aspect of self-care is setting boundaries. Boundaries are the lines you draw that protect your time, space, and emotional energy. Without boundaries, kindness can quickly turn into overextension. People might start to take advantage of your willingness to help, and you may find yourself saying yes to things that don't align with your own values or needs. But when you set clear, healthy boundaries, you're able to prioritize what really matters, whether that's your personal well-being, your work, or your relationships. Self-care also involves recognizing your own needs. It can be easy to neglect your mental health, physical health, or personal growth when you're always focused on others. However, true kindness starts with being in tune with your own needs and recognizing that taking time for yourself isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It might be as simple as taking a walk, spending a few hours alone with a book, or pursuing a hobby that you enjoy. These moments of solitude or enjoyment help you reconnect with yourself, refresh your spirit, and come back to others with a full heart. Also, true kindness involves self-compassion. It's about being kind to yourself, even when you make mistakes or fall short. Too often, when we're trying to be nice, we put an immense amount of pressure on ourselves to meet others' expectations, and when we don't, we can be very hard on ourselves. But practicing self-compassion allows you to give yourself grace and forgiveness. Just as you would show understanding to a friend who made a mistake, you should also show that same kindness to yourself. Ultimately, practicing self-care and setting boundaries doesn't make you less of a kind person. It makes you a more effective one. When you're whole and well, you have more to give. You have the capacity to truly listen, to offer help in meaningful ways, and to be present with others. But if you ignore your own needs, your ability to be truly kind will diminish over time. You'll likely feel resentful, drained, and burnt out. And when that happens, you're no longer helping anyone, including yourself. Taking time to care for yourself also prevents you from falling into the trap of trying to be everything for everyone. You'll learn that it's okay to say no when you need to let others stand on their own, and to recognize that your worth isn't tied to how much you do for others. You are worthy of love, respect, and care simply because you exist, not because of the things you do for others. So how do you begin to incorporate self-care into your life? Start by taking small steps. Identify areas where you're overextending yourself and begin to set boundaries. Practice saying no, even when it feels uncomfortable at first. Make space for the things that rejuvenate you, whether it's physical activities, creative pursuits, or simply moments of relaxation. Remember, self-care is not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing practice of checking in with yourself, recognizing when you need rest, and having the courage to prioritize your own well-being. When you start from a place of self-care, your kindness towards others becomes more genuine, sustainable, and meaningful. So, take care of yourself first, and the rest will follow. Section 9. The importance of saying no. Learning to say no is one of the most powerful tools you can have in your personal and professional life. It may sound simple, but for many people, it's a skill that's incredibly difficult to master. Saying no doesn't make you a bad person. In fact, it makes you someone who is self-aware and respects their own time and energy. It's essential for maintaining healthy boundaries and ensuring that you're not overburdened by others' expectations. Let's start by understanding why saying no is so hard for many people. For some, it's a fear of disappointing others. You might worry that if you say no, people will think you're selfish, rude, or unkind. The truth is, though, constantly saying yes when you really mean no can actually lead to resentment, not just from others, but also from yourself. You might feel like you're giving all your time and energy away, yet receiving little in return. Over time, this can build frustration and bitterness. So by saying no in a respectful way, you're not only protecting your own mental and physical health, but you're also fostering more honest, authentic relationships. Saying no also forces you to prioritize your own needs and responsibilities. It's impossible to be everywhere and do everything, and attempting to do so only leads to exhaustion. When you learn to say no, you're better able to focus on what truly matters to you, whether that's spending quality time with your family, working on a personal project, or simply taking time to rest and recharge. It's about recognizing that your time is valuable, and if you don't protect it, no one else will. But saying no doesn't mean you have to be harsh or unkind. It's all about delivering your response with empathy and respect. You don't need to provide long explanations or feel guilty for setting boundaries. A simple, "I'm unable to commit to this right now," or "I need to focus on something else at the moment," can go a long way. If you find it difficult to say no directly, you can offer an alternative solution, such as suggesting another person who might be able to help, or providing a future time when you might be available. This shows that while you're not able to say yes right now, you're still considerate of the other person's needs. Learning to say no also helps build your self-esteem. When you consistently put others' needs before your own, you may feel like you're not worthy of prioritizing your own desires or limits. But when you practice saying no, you're reinforcing the belief that your needs matter just as much as everyone else's. This boosts your confidence and enables you to make decisions that align with your values rather than out of obligation or guilt. One of the challenges many people face is the feeling of guilt when saying no. The key to overcoming this is to reframe your mindset. Remember that saying no isn't about rejecting others. It's about protecting your own time and energy so you can be there for the things that truly matter. You're not being selfish, you're being wise. You can still be a kind and helpful person while maintaining your boundaries. In fact, the more you practice saying no, the more respect you'll earn, both from others and from yourself. Another important aspect of saying no is recognizing when you're being asked to take on something that doesn't align with your goals or values. Sometimes people will make requests of you that don't serve your best interests or that conflict with what you're working on. Saying no in these situations is not only about protecting your time, but also about making sure you're focusing your energy on the things that truly move you forward. You might find that by saying no to some requests, you're actually saying yes to opportunities that are more in line with your personal growth. In the workplace, learning to say no is especially important. Many people find it difficult to turn down additional tasks or projects, often because they fear it will make them appear uncooperative or lazy. But constantly overloading yourself can reduce your productivity and job satisfaction. By saying no when appropriate, you can focus on doing fewer things better, leading to higher quality work and less stress. It also sets a healthy precedent with your colleagues and supervisors. They'll respect you more when they see that you manage your workload effectively and communicate openly about your limits. Ultimately, saying no is an essential act of self-care. It's about creating space for yourself and making sure you have the time, energy, and focus to pursue your goals and take care of your well-being. Saying no may be uncomfortable at first, but the more you practice it, the easier it becomes. And the more you practice, the better you'll get at balancing kindness with self-respect. So, the next time you're faced with a request or invitation that doesn't align with your priorities, remember that it's okay to say no. In fact, it's one of the best things you can do, for yourself and for others. Section 10. Striking the balance between kindness and self-respect. So what have we learned today? The world certainly needs kindness, and being nice is an admirable quality. However, when that kindness comes at the expense of your mental, emotional, or even physical health, it can be damaging. That's why it's important to find a balance between being kind to others and being kind to yourself. Let's break down exactly what that looks like and how you can practice it in your daily life. First, let's talk about boundaries. Healthy boundaries are the foundation of balanced kindness. Setting limits on your time, energy, and emotional investment isn't selfish, it's necessary. A good way to set boundaries is by clearly identifying what you're willing to do and what you're not. For example, if a friend frequently asks you to help with projects at the last minute, it's okay to politely decline and explain that you need advance notice to help effectively. Saying no when something doesn't align with your limits allows you to protect your time and energy for things that are truly important. Next, learn to listen to your own needs. People who are too nice often focus so much on what others want that they forget to check in with themselves. Take time each day to ask, what do I need right now? Whether it's rest, personal space, or working on a passion project, honoring your own desires helps you build self-respect. It also prevents feelings of resentment, which can arise when you constantly put yourself last. Another key to balanced kindness is practicing assertiveness. Assertiveness doesn't mean being aggressive or rude. It's simply communicating your thoughts, feelings, and boundaries clearly and respectfully. For instance, instead of agreeing to do extra work because you feel pressured, try saying, "I'm currently at capacity and won't be able to take on more at this time." Assertive communication helps others understand where you stand without damaging relationships. It's also crucial to remember that saying no doesn't require an excuse. Many people feel compelled to justify their decisions when they decline something, but a simple "no, thank you" is enough. You don't owe anyone a lengthy explanation for protecting your own well-being. Recognize that your time is valuable, and it's okay to prioritize your own needs. Finally, remind yourself that kindness and self-respect go hand in hand. When you show up for yourself, you're actually able to be kinder and more present for others in a sustainable way. By filling your own cup first, you prevent burnout and maintain the energy to give from a place of genuine care rather than obligation. True kindness isn't about self-sacrifice. It's about creating healthy relationships where everyone's needs, including your own, are respected. In summary, kindness is powerful, but when it turns into people-pleasing, it can hurt more than it helps. Set clear boundaries, listen to your own needs, practice assertiveness, and learn to say no without guilt. By finding balance, you'll cultivate kindness that comes from a place of strength rather than depletion. Thanks for watching, and if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insights on living a balanced, empowered life.